So, I have the Platinum Trophy for Trails of Cold Steel 4, and according to my Twitch VODs here that I'm looking at, I've put about 200 hours into this game. Let's talk about some Cold Steel 4. So this isn't going to be one of my normal videos. Usually I record off of a script. This time I'm not recording off of a script. This release actually crept up on me. I had been planning to do a lot of coverage for the game, but just recently I've been really busy, both with streaming stuff and off of stream, that I just was not paying attention. And it's like, as of recording this video, it's about to come out in like a day or so. So instead, I just have a notepad with a bunch of notes on it of things that I kind of want to talk about with regards to the game. And that's what we're going to do. So I hope you understand, but who knows, you may like this format a little bit better, and if so, we could maybe do something more like this in the future. One thing I do want to get out of the way, because this was asked when I was covering Persona 5 Royal, and people were wondering how I had like 300 hours into the game before I even released in the West. I actually speak Japanese, so I picked up Trails of Cold Steel 4 2 years ago, and we played it on Twitch. We played 2 full playthroughs, and we got the Platinum Trophy. So if you're wondering, that's how I have 200 hours and the Platinum Trophy already, even though it's like literally not out as of the recording of this video. So something I want to preface here is that while I do have these notes that we're going to be going through that I want to talk about, this isn't really a full-on review of the game. I'm going to be talking about some things that are different with the game, maybe some things that you might want to, look out for as you're playing through the game, take into consideration if you're going into the game, that sort of stuff, but it's not really a full-on review. The TLDR review, if you're a fan of Cold Steel 1, 2, and 3, you're going to like Cold Steel 4. It's more of the same. It's actually probably the best in the entire series. But you don't really need me to tell you that you're going to like it. If you're a fan of the ones up until this point, you're going to enjoy this one. So the first major talking point that I wanted to talk about here is with regards to how the overall story fits into the narrative. Obviously, Cold Steel 4 is a sequel to Cold Steel 3. It actually picks up almost exactly where the third game left off. It's been a while since I played 3. I'm pretty sure this one takes place exactly where the third game left off. But it is a direct sequel to Cold Steel 3. At the same time, it was originally supposed to serve as the capstone to not only Trails of Cold Steel, but also to the Erebonia portion of the overall Legend of Heroes story narrative. I say it was supposed to serve as that because earlier this year, Hajimari no Kiseki, the latest game in the series, came out in Japan and basically retconned all that and threw in a whole bunch of extra stuff. But it was originally supposed to be the ending to those. So why is that significant? Why is that something I want to talk about? Well, obviously, Cold Steel 4, ending the Cold Steel, you probably want to play Cold Steel 1, 2, and 3 before you play 4, otherwise you're going to be completely lost. However, you kind of also want to play, or at least be very familiar with, what happened before Trails of Cold Steel. So for those that don't know, the Legend of Heroes series is actually a long-running series. As of Trails of Cold Steel 4, it is 9 games long. With the more recent release of Hajimari no Kiseki, it's 10 games long. And in this series, there are smaller narratives. You have the Trails in the Sky arc, you have the 2 Crossbell games, and then you have the Cold Steel series. And for the most part, these are contained stories with a more broader overlaying narrative also playing out within them. They're set up in such a way that you can play them, in any order, but you do get more out of them if you've played the other games in the series. However, starting a little bit with Cold Steel 3, but getting a lot more prominent in Cold Steel 4, this starts to change a little bit. The devs kind of expect you to have already played the rest of the games in the series. So with Cold Steel 4, if you go into it without having played Trails in the Sky, or even more importantly and more specifically the Cold Steel games, which is a problem in and of itself because they're not available in English officially, on some parts of the story you're going to be a little bit lost about what they're talking about. You're going to get introduced to a lot of characters that you're supposed to already know but you don't know, and you're going to have parts that are going to be spoiled for you from those previous games because the devs expect you to already know character relations, character affiliations, or major story points that have already taken place within the greater narrative. You may not care about this. That may be a good thing for you, but it is something to be aware of when going into Cold Steel 4, that if you have not played everything up until Cold Steel 4, and that's 8 games, there will be parts of this game that you will not understand. There will be parts of this game that will spoil previous games for you in pretty massive ways if you do go back to see those games, or to if they release the Crossbow games, you will already know what happens in them because of Cold Steel 4. Moving on, I want to talk about some more mechanical things with the game. It's been about 2 years, so a little bit hazy on it, but there are some things that stood out to me that I still remember today that changed when going from Cold Steel 3 to Cold Steel 4 that you may wish to be aware of. One of the first things that really stood out to me is with regards to the break gauge. So if you remember in Cold Steel 3, they introduced a break gauge. It's another little gauge below, I think it was below, the HP bar of the enemies you're facing, and whenever you deal damage, in addition to dealing HP damage, you dealt break damage. And then whenever you would break an enemy, it would stun them until their next action. You would get all guaranteed, not really guaranteed critical hits, but guaranteed like follow-up attacks on them, and you would get BP every time you hit them, and all sorts of bonus effects would happen. They take extra damage and whatnot. That's still here. However, the devs decided to sort of nerf your ability to abuse that mechanic in Cold Steel 4. So you can no longer abuse Muse's Brave Order, for example, with, I believe it was Chrono Drive, the one that lets you take 2 turns in a row. You can no longer abuse those 2 together to take infinite turns after you've broken an enemy. I mean, you can still do it on lesser enemies, but on boss fights, it's a little bit more difficult now. The reason being is because they added in a, I will call it feature, but they added in a new mechanic to basically every single boss. Not all of them, but 90% of them have this, to where if their HP gets below a certain threshold, it's usually between 75 and 50% HP, regardless of whether they are broken or not, they will fully restore their break gauge, and they would give themselves a 3 to 4 turn like super buff, where they take less damage and whatnot. And how this breaks the infinite turn thing is that if they're broken and you knock them below 50%, as soon as they cross that, whatever the threshold is for that, the boss, usually 50%, they will come out of break immediately. So you can't continue doing your infinite turn combo. If you're not abusing Muse's Brave Order to take infinite turns, this isn't going to affect you, but I liked using it a lot because it's just a lot of fun to not let the enemy take any turns, and they did nerf this, so just something to be aware of. But moving on with Brave Orders, or continuing on with Brave Orders, a lot of the Brave Orders did have their, they were adjusted. So, I mean, they may not last as many turns, they may last more turns. They may not cost as much BP, or they may cost more BP. Some of the numbers may be different for them. Like I said, I don't remember the exact specifics, but I do know there was tuning made to these Brave Orders. So just be aware that you might want to just double check with what the Brave Orders are when you're going through to make sure they still function the exact same way you remember them functioning from Cold Steel 3. If you were a fan of the Master Quartz system, specifically having a Master Quartz and a Sub-Master Quartz, you'll be happy to know that that has returned, so that's still there. And if you were a fan of the mech battles that always took place, that took place from time to time throughout the series, specifically at the very end of Cold Steel 1 and then occasionally through Cold Steel 2 and 3, if you're a fan of those, rejoice. They are back in full force in Cold Steel 4. If you were like me and you're kind of lukewarm on them, or if you just didn't like them, I got some bad news for you, because you have to do them a lot, and I do mean a lot. So learn to love the mech battles, learn to understand how the mechanics of them function, understand that your character's power level has literally no bearing on how powerful your mechs are, so you need to equip them and, kit them out individually of your main party members. It's very important because, like I said, you have to do mech battles a lot, and if you're playing on the easier difficulties, not that big of a deal. If you're going for the Platinum Trophy and you need to play on Nightmare mode, definitely make sure you know what you're doing with those mech battles. Moving on to minigames, Vantage Masters has returned. I was very happy about this. I love Vantage Masters. It was one of my favorite minigames they added in Cold Steel 3, and I was happy that they put it back in Cold Steel 4. It's still there, so if you didn't like it, you don't really have to do it, but do know that there are quartz and master quartz locked behind playing through Vantage Masters and beating all of the people you can beat in the game. It's also a pretty decent way to farm U material. Not the best way, but it is a decent way to farm U material if you would rather do something different than, fighting enemies over and over and over again, which is actually the best way in Cold Steel 4. Another minigame that returned, much to my disappointment, because it's my least favorite minigame in the entire series, is Pamutto. I don't know what it's called in English, because I forgot what they called it in the other games. I know it was most prominently featured in the Crossbell games, which have no official English release, but it is basically a Puyo Puyo Tetris ripoff. And again, there are quartz and master quartz locked behind this. It is incredibly frustrating, mainly because it is like 90% luck based. So have fun with that. It is beatable. It is very frustrating. And if you're like me and you're not very good at those games, it's even more frustrating. So the last thing I kind of wanted to touch on before we move on is that in Cold Steel 4, there is no post-game. I'll be talking about something else a little bit later that you do need to take note of, but do note that once you beat the game, you have beaten the game. There's no bonus dungeon or anything like that afterwards that you can continue to play through. Alright, so some miscellaneous things to talk about. This is going to be more for you people who, like your waifus and stuff like that, but in this game, Rean can romance a character, one of the female party members that you've been traveling with throughout Cold Steel 1, 2, 3, and now through 4. There is a intermission chapter that happens in the game, and during this section, depending on how you have been interacting with your character of interest, or just really any of the characters, you will be given the option to see some really really well done scenes. There are scenes with the guys. You can't romance the guys in this game, but you do get like really nice scenes with them where they have like the little bro moments and whatnot. But specifically for the female characters, you can choose one of them to be your romance partner for Rean. And you can choose literally any female character from Cold Steel 1 through 4 that has like flirted with Rean or shown interest in him throughout the story, with one exception that I will not be mentioning because I don't want to spoil who that is. You can find that out for yourself, but there is one character who you may go into the game thinking, oh, hopefully I can romance them, and you won't be able to, unfortunately. It was a character I really liked, but I kind of saw it coming. So with regards to those romances, there are a few things to keep in mind. Obviously, you get that nice little scene with them. You get a sort of a confession scene where the two confess to each other. They talk about sort of what they're going to do for the future, and it's a really nice little scene. Some of them get a little bit lewd if you are talking with some of the older characters, such as Sarah, but some of them also are just like, kind of what you would expect from a romance between two people. The other thing you get from romancing any of the characters in the game is that you do get an extra bonus scene after the credits. It's a very small scene, but it is a nice little acknowledgement that you get after the credits, based on whoever you choose as your romantic interest. Alright, and the last thing I want to talk about has to deal with the ending stuff, and no spoilers, I won't be spoiling anything, but there are some things that I'd like to get out there with regards to this game, how and what to do with its ending. So this game has multiple endings. I believe it has 3, if I remember correctly. I know for a fact it has 2. I want to say it has 3, but it has one true ending. And this is important because this one true ending is the canon ending for this game. And what I mean by that is when you pick up Hajimari no Kiseki, if it ever gets localized, I assume it will, but if it ever gets localized, it's the game that comes after this, it assumes you got the true ending to Cold Steel 4. So you definitely want to get that. You do need to put in some extra work to get the true ending. It's not just something you just get for playing through the game. You have to do all of the side quests, literally every single one of them. And then, if I remember correctly, you have to make a few decisions as well towards the end of the game. I'm a little bit hazy on that one, but I do know for a fact you have to do all of the side quests in the game. That is definitely a requirement. And then you also have to end up reloading your initial clear data. So if you get just like the normal ending, you then have to reload that clear data and do it a second time. So do the final boss a second time in order to get the true ending, which, by the way, comes with an incredibly awesome, super special, and unique boss fight, along with a bunch of extra story scenes that you're going to want to see. Another thing to take into consideration with Trails of Cold Steel 4 is that your save file for this game does carry over into the next game, Hajimari no Kiseki. Specifically, it carries over your relationships. So if you get your relationships with all your party members really high, male and female included, you will start off with bonuses to their relationships, pretty massive bonuses actually, in the next game. So, you know, they have, if you use them in battle, they have like their little relationship bar that goes up, and the higher it goes up, they get extra attacks, extra abilities they can use with each other when they're linked together. That starts at a significantly higher level based on how much your relationship with the characters was going into that game, what's on your save file. So if everybody's maxed, I believe everybody starts off at like 6, level 6 out of 7 in the next game, as opposed to like level 2 or 3. So pretty big increase that you get for doing that. The other part that carries over is your romance partner. So whoever you choose as your romantic interest at the end of Cold Steel 4, well, not really the end, you choose it kind of in the middle of Cold Steel 4, but whoever you choose as your romantic partner in Cold Steel 4 will carry over into the next game. And when you do this, you'll be given extra cutscenes, extra dialogue, change dialogue, based on who your romantic interest was when you carry that over. So that's something to keep in mind if you're somebody who likes to do multiple playthroughs. You know, save yourself some trouble and make sure your last playthrough is with whoever your true waifu is. And that's really about it, what I wanted to talk about with this game. It's a really fun game. I think it's probably my favorite in the series. I just liked the payoff that you got, but a lot of that payoff comes from playing the previous 8 games up until Cold Steel 4, and I feel that that's, you know, a little bit unfair to the other Western gamers who don't speak Japanese and, you know, don't have the privilege of being able to play the 2 Cold Steel games, which are not released. I'm actually currently scripting out a video to cover what a massive issue this is for the series, especially when you take into consideration that now Hajimari no Kiseki exists, which I don't know how they're going to release that game if they don't put out the Cold Steel games first, because like it basically requires that you have played those games. But either way, that's a topic for another video. I will have that out eventually. I'm currently scripting it out. I want to make sure it's really good before I release it. But yeah, that's really all I wanted to talk about today with Cold Steel 4. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you don't really hate this way of doing it. Like I said, I've been very busy, so I had to do a little bit different of an approach to this video than I normally do. But let me know if you like it. I can do more stuff like this, and we can, you know, kind of mix it up a little bit. These are a little bit easier for me to produce than my other videos, which can usually take upwards of a week to get out, maybe sometimes even longer than that. So either way, hope you enjoyed Cold Steel 4. I enjoyed it. I think you will too, but just be cautious that you may want to look up some stuff ahead of time before going into it, or you may have to, you know, come to grips or come to terms with the fact that you might get spoiled. There's no might. You will get spoiled on stuff that happened previously. But that's it. Enough rambling for me. Go play Cold Steel 4, have fun with it, and I'll see you in the next video.